So the first thing that people ask me whenever they hear about this is why? Why the heck would you do something like this? The second question is always, how did you do something like this? And then the third thing is always just still general confusion. Mostly still why. But I'll tell you, there's three main reasons. One, I'm just a total fool. The second one is other people were making cool games and I was starting to get jealous because I didn't have any time. And the third one was I didn't have any time. So that was kind of where I was at. So I know everyone always has the same dream that I do, right? You're a millennial, you grew up in American hustle culture, and you're kind of like, look at this wasted time right here, right? Like, what an absolute waste of my 5 minutes being in this line. I wish I could be making a game on my phone right now. Well, boom, this is my inspiration right here. The other thing is there's this Massachusetts initiative called MMO Games, a collective that we started, making small games, and I was like, shoot, I'm too busy to actually say yes. Like, I'm smart. I know I can't commit and actually finish this. Except then I was like, once I found I could do it on my phone, I was like, well, you know what? Maybe I can. Yeah, so, all right, so the reason I felt I was too busy, one, during my day job, I was working on some secret game that you'll never recognize. It's blurred out, right? So, and then in my spare time, like my thing, I already was working with people on a separate like RPG little project there. And then what I needed was not just my spare time, I needed my spare time, right? I was really going to commit to doing this just like waiting in line, picking up groceries, like weird places, or like I was the passenger in a car. Like I was gonna make the game just in that time. So here's my dev machine. It is a S22 Galaxy Ultra. I did bring my computer with me here today. One of the important things that you'll see here is this stylus, right? That is key when you have fat fingers that can't touch precisely the part of the code that you want. So that's a real game changer right there.
Sick background.
Thank you. So the best thing about having this be my dev machine is that I can work anywhere, right? So I have tons of offices, right? When I'm getting breakfast at the counter, waiting for my order, when I'm at gymnastics, watching my daughter do back bends, or the multitude of times that I'm watching swimming or by the pool or at vacation, and most importantly, that's all I'll say about that. All right, so I've done multiple games on my phone, and I'm gonna start off with the first experience that I had. This is a game called Standoff. This was my first foray into phone game making. I did everything. I grabbed some Cinti models and did a lot of like card stuff. So the way the game works is you get cards, and the first phase is you decide who to give those cards to, right? And you don't know what else they're gonna get, so it's kind of like a hidden information game. And then the second phase is you play the cards that you've been given, and you choose who to play them on, and you try to defeat people and get them out and be the last one standing. And so you kind of have to secretly work with the other people to try and like overload someone with a bunch of attacks. So I chose this game because I thought it would be easy, and I was prototyping it at GDC with just a physical deck of cards. And so some of the stats for this game, I released it in June of 2023 on 4/11. It was in the second season of MMO Games. And all of the cards are literally just, like 2 through ace equivalents. So like I prototyped it and just straight up did that. So I thought this would be easy, a nice simple way to do this. Make all the cards and make it really simple. So for this first one, I was learning the process. And so the first thing I did was I noticed that Godot was available on Android, and I was like, sweet. Like, I've finally got it. Like all these silly ways that I wanted to do it before don't matter because it just works. And for the most part, that was true. The other tool that I used was Pixel Studio Pro, which is an Android app for pixel art. And that was pretty nice, pretty easy. I tried it out for free at first, and then I upgraded to Pro once I was like, yep, this is definitely working out. And then finally, I used Termux, which is a terminal so that I could have version control. because that's still a requisite even if I'm doing it on the phone. I wanted to be able to commit and reset and mess around, and also to push it to my computer just in case. So my first thought was Godot will be easy because there's a .NET thing. I've done C# tools since like 2007. I use it on Unity as well, so that's great. Only problem is that version was not on the phone. So I was like, all right, there's this extension called Godot Rust, and I've always wanted to learn Rust. So I'm excited, I'm gonna do this, right? So then I was like, all right, let me figure out how to get this extension in here. And then I realized you can't use extensions on the phone at that point. So it's like, all right, GDScript it is. Let's dive in, I'm sure that's supported. So this is what the dev environment looks like. This is actually, you can see that I have my stylus out here. You have, your code. It looks exactly the same. The code is pretty readable if you're on your phone. You can also blow it up. That's key. The only problem is I want to add a new function to the bottom of this file, right? This is what happens. The virtual keyboard comes up and it covers up that section. I could have probably done something smarter or tried to actually change stuff because I was building the engine anyways, but I realized that you could just pop that output tab up and on the bottom and have it all above the fold, right? The virtual keyboard comes up and now everything's above it just fine. And this was kind of how I operated until eventually, a total game changer, I got a Bluetooth keyboard. A little tiny one that fits in my pocket that you can open up.
Could you edit scripts in Termux?
Yeah, I guess you could, but I didn't want to deal with going back and forth because especially at that point, we weren't Godot wasn't ready for external editors. It wasn't yes, we need to watch the file system. And especially on Android, that's totally different and wacky. Which there was bugs on that where I'd be I edit a file and that's hey, it's reload, it's changed on disk. And I'm oh, let me hit reload and see what happens. Oh, it just lost all my work. Great, start again. Yeah, okay, so that was super awesome and it made things go fast. So now I want to talk about there were some exceptions to what I was able to do on the phone for my first game, right? So the first thing is debugging was super hard. And so, you just put logs because at that point, the game window would take over in the front, and if you hit a breakpoint, you would just freeze, and you couldn't get back to it. It didn't handle the processes quite as well. So sometimes I would just push to grab it on my computer or my laptop and check it really quick because it was super, super easy. The other one was when I mentioned I wanted to use Godot Rust. Well, I also wanted to use Fmod and had already gotten my audio guy, Garrett, to start making sweet dynamic music in Fmod. Except they were really great and extensions didn't work, right? So I was uh-oh, I can't check if the audio is working on my phone. So what I did is I made a branch called audio on my desktop and just kept merging into it every time I did work from my phone and just didn't have any audio on the phone. Because otherwise, it would just not load, and the game wouldn't work. So, yeah. And then finally, this is what it looks like if you try to open it with an extension at that point. It just says load errors, and then it doesn't run correctly. And then the final thing on that, you can't import 3D models, right? It didn't have all of the C++ software to actually change an FBX into GLTF and do all those things, the importers. So I had to import on my laptop, but once they're imported, everything's fine. It's saved out everything it needs to save. And so you can actually even change the models and tweak stuff on the phone. You just couldn't do that initial import unless you're on the computer. So again, good thing I have Git working, just put it on there, push it down. And then the final one is you couldn't export builds. So no matter how cool I made the game, I wouldn't have been able to share it with anyone unless I pushed it to my laptop and then built from there.
How easy is the integration with Git?
How is what?
The integration with Git.
How is it with Git? I mean, it's super easy. Once you get it set up for Termux, it's just on a computer. I mean, that being said, I also use command line on the computer, so it's just it wasn't any different for me. Yeah, so those are the lessons I learned on my first game, release, cool, that's great. And then I moved on to a second game called Deeper. So this one, we were all kind of obsessed with extraction, the extraction genre. And so I was making an extraction RPG. So it's kind of turn-based, but not really. Like it's like the active battle system, like active time battle. So like these bars fill up, and that gives you like an action point. And then you can see on the bottom, different moves cost different action points. So like you have to save up and wait with your characters to do cool ones. You could go in, you could get trophies and loot and all this great stuff and bring it out and go view it in your base. And then the other part that I did was I made it so that you could change the palettes. So all the art was done in a specific way, and you can unlock these cool different palettes that you could use. So this one was released in September. It was the immediate quarter after, because we do every 2 months. It was done in 4.3. It was the third time last season. I got a bunch of enemies, classes, and 8 different palettes, and I was super happy about the amount I got done in that time. When I first set out to make this game, I thought, okay, like the phone thing was cool. This time I'm gonna figure out how I can like integrate it into a regular workflow. Like what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the things that the phone is good at, or like things that aren't hard, and do those when I have time. And on the computer, just do all the things that I need to do. And my decision was like little pieces of art, because I was doing a pixel game. And like you can make custom resources, like make Excel files, that kind of stuff. But then most of the coding and like all that other stuff would be on the computer. That was my plan, except I ran into a slight hitch. This is my office, and that is my computer. So I had 18 inches of standing water, ruined lots of stuff, and had to replace it all. And I prioritized my work computer, my other stuff before actually replacing it. So the new plan, all right, the phone is what we're gonna do everything on again. Cool. So I had some concessions knowing that this was the thing that I was doing. I wanted to do 2D because I didn't want to mess with models. I wanted to keep the controls super simple because virtual keys, like if I had any intense actions, like prototyping those out or figuring those out would be even harder. I was just gonna use like the built-in audio system, and I was just gonna focus on the content. So the first part of that is doing the 2D art, right? So I chose the Game Boy aesthetic because I'm terrible at art, and so I thought this would be easier than doing color. The way I did that is I made everything in grayscale. And again, I am a programmer, right? I didn't know if it was obvious since this is so good, but I did everything in grayscale, and I just did my own variants of them so that I could make like 3 enemies out of 1 essentially to have more content. So here we have the green snake, the blue snake, and the red snake. I know it was pretty obvious, right? This is what it looks like after I applied the shader. So I just did a shader that color matches to whatever piece of gray that we have. We have 4 different shades of gray, and translates it to whatever the appropriate color is in my palette. The palette, though, was actually a resource that I made, and the shader that I made just accepted the palette and could change the colors at real time. So when I designed a color palette called the Notorious RGB, I made sure that the green, blue, and red snake actually showed up as green, blue, and red snakes. So everything was on Pixel Studio Pro. You can see at the bottom here, I kind of did animation. It has layers. I just made each thing a layer, exported it after. Worked in very simple, easy to color pixel art, low res. Game Boy's 144 by 160, or the other way around, I forget which. So it's easy to just do really low res art and make it work. So each frame is a layer, and then because I was working grayscale, also pro tip was just to change the background to not be the transparent, and then deal with it after. So the next thing that made it easy, I wanted to keep the controls simple, right? And so all I'm checking is if certain actions are pressed, which is the built-in input system. Keep it nice and simple. So on the computer, when I'm working on the computer, the idea would be like Z and X would be like A and B or whatever, and up, down, left, right? But on mobile, we don't have those actions to use. But you can actually throw those actions if you want. So if you're to make a virtual key, you actually can just say, hey, I pressed this thing. Like tell them that they pressed it. And this is a button response code. So if I have a button that you tap, it just says, hey, they tapped action, whatever, like by string, by name. So I used that and actually made a little Game Boy keyboard, right? So this just throws, all those just throw actions back up to the input system. And all I did was put it below the game, right? So the cool thing about this is having it hidden here means that when you're on the computer, it's cut off because of the window resolution. And I made it so that, you know, if you scale the window, it doesn't show new stuff, it scales the whole viewport. But on Android, right, since I'm in portrait, it can't do that. It matches with. So it just so happens that when you do it on Android, because it's hidden there, you get the buttons there. And so it's like feels like a Game Boy. It's kind of cool. So the other part was instead of using Fmod to do everything, I just used the built-in audio. I heard a lot of cool audio, but because it was all Game Boy, it was all super hype and super fast. And because this was an extraction, like supposed to be like dungeon feel, all I had to do literally was just pitch it down, and all of a sudden it was like, holy crap, this is a different piece. This sounds really cool. So yeah, so you have all these things, and literally just changing this pitch like gives you all different experiences in that music. Okay, so the final thing for that, I wanted to do a lot of content, right? And one of the things that's great is resources, right? Like you can just like declare a type of resource, make all kinds of content, load it in, that's great, right? I had all these like plans and these ideas, but as soon as I made a status effect a resource, I started having ideas of being able to do cool things, and I ended up creating like, oh, this derives from that resource, but it's gonna have all its own code. So I ended up actually like kind of coding everything anyways. But the system itself worked pretty good. So we had like status effect definitions, and I'm like, oh yeah, everything's derived from that, and you do this and that. And then like in the game, you create an instance of it and say, hey, go do your ticking and counting and all that stuff, and figure out when you're supposed to be done. And then part of that, actually, I ended up liking it so much that all enemies have like initial status effects. And that's how I made unique, cool enemies. So like I have bats that there's like 15 of them on screen, and no matter what damage you do, only one bat goes away. And that was just like, bats is a status effect. And bat status effect says on attack, reduce damage to 1. And the sprite is controlled by whatever their health is. And it just goes from 15 to 1. 15 to none, I guess I would say. Okay, and then the other one was, all right, so I want to not do art for all the equipment. So I just have an icon for a sword, an icon for a shield, and everything's 1 of the 2. Put them in there, and I thought that'd be super great. And then I started like wanting to do like more with it. And again, I started coding some stuff, and eventually ended up with all types of different stuff. I have like unique stuff that you can only get one of, like Excalibur and stuff like that, whereas everything else is like generated at the time that you loot it. But yeah, it worked out. It wasn't too bad. So I wanted to talk about the things that got better with this iteration. This time, like you could have a side-by-side window and actually debug, like while you're seeing on screen. The only thing is, if you needed to see the inspector or something that was on the right half of the screen, it didn't like shrink, right? So that was hidden under the window. You'd have to like move the window away, and you wouldn't get it back after that. Like once you completely hide it, it's gone. And so you could only inspect for the rest of that frame. You could be like, all right, what happened for the rest of the frame? Let's see if I can find it. Make sure it's not something that happens next frame. Yeah, so that's a major improvement. I'll talk about my final game that I've been working on my phone. This one is called Kinstar Saga. There'll be a talk later from the artists on how we did our anime style. But we wanted to do an 80s anime style roguelike auto battler. So every time you go to a new place, you get to pick a new unit, and they combine, and then you fight, and then go to the next one, et cetera, et cetera. And this is like a big, full 3D game. So that's like kind of like, to do it on the phone, I'm like, all right, definitely have to do like a very specific plan again. Have my computer, I'm gonna do everything on my computer, and the phone, I think what it's best for, like the lesson I've learned, is like data entry, setting up skeleton code, that kind of thing. Like you can make a bunch of empty classes It's no issue where you're like kind of thinking about how am I going to architect this. So it's actually kind of great for architecting. Like if you don't tie everything together, it's kind of like it's almost like a rudimentary version of like UML modeling, where you're like, well, all right, so I'm gonna have this, and it's gonna interact with this, and then it'll contain some of these, and it'll do this. You can do some variable work too. Like, okay, I'm gonna have an array of these, and I'll make the class and make the class name so that compiles and everything. But you don't have to like fill out all the logic. So like that's what my plan is. Like, do all the resources, all the definitions, all those things that I can do. Yeah. So the first thing is the skeleton code. Like, it's super easy, right, to do this. And you can even add script templates too. I won't talk about it, but like if you add script templates to your game, like when you create stuff, you can have it fill out all of this kind of boilerplate code that you need. Like if for my status effect definitions on that previous game, when I created a new one, it had all of the 7 functions that I could possibly overwrite, and then I'd just delete the ones I didn't use. The other great thing, resource work. I mean, like it's super easy, especially once you've established it. You're just like, okay, let me create a new resource, make it of this type, let me name it, and like it's done. So that's like, you can just make a ton of those. And especially like if you're just using the inspector, you can fill those out pretty easy. So in Kinstar, what I'm doing is like, for all the new classes that I make, I'm like, oh, I want an ice mage. Go in, make like, I have like 5 resources that need to get made. I go like make those, tie them together. If I have visuals already, I can like drag and drop them into the correct spots and then try it out and be like, cool, ice mage works. Like I'll go code the unique stuff about it later on the computer. Scenes is great. Like making scenes, as long as you're not doing like weird 3D like scenes like where you need to move stuff and combine stuff and go crazy on that. But like UI is easy to do. Like simple ones where you're just dropping a model in somewhere is easy. Moving, not great, but like everything else is good. Okay, so this time around, the improvements that I'm seeing already, and this is 4.4.1, extensions load. That was a big thing, which was like in a later version of 4.3. And that is like super awesome because now I have Fmod running, and so I get to hear the dynamic music as you switch from like planning to attacking and in the menus and all this other cool stuff. The export menu exists again now, so like if you go, you can actually make an APK build. It's a little complicated to set up, but it's possible, which is a huge improvement. Yeah, any questions? We only have like 1 or 2 minutes for questions.
Templates. I'm mostly a C# guy, so when I open up Visual Studio, I make a script and I inherit from it.
Yep.
I just do override. What is a script template in GD script?
So he asked about what are script templates in Godot. And so basically you can go and create a folder, which is literally script templates, and you create, it's like kind of like folder by name. So like if you want status effects, you'd create a status effect folder, and in that folder, if you put a like new status effect.gd or .cs, so you can do it in C#, if you go add that empty file there, whenever you go to that menu of like, I want to create a new script, like what should it inherit from? When you choose like your status effect, for example, you can set it so that the default will be the template that you created. So it'll literally just basically start from whatever the file is that you wrote. So you just write out the file once, and then it will be like, bloop, there it is. And there's a couple of helpful like macros, so you can be like underscore like class name, like what is the name that they typed in that should go here, like based on the little dialogue. All right, last question.
Yep. I tried once to make a game on my phone with the mobile version of Godot, and I run into a pretty weird issue where the process loop only ran like 3 times and then it was over. I was wondering, like I still don't know how to fix that. I was wondering if you ran into some similar complications where you were like, this doesn't make sense on mobile.
Yeah. So you ran into specifically like an issue where it didn't keep processing, and it's really hard to understand why. I did run into some of that stuff earlier, but usually it was my fault. Like usually it was like if something isn't working, I had to make sure to go check for errors like after I ran it. Like they would be they're there after you close, like for a little, like until you run again. So you just go check the errors. There's usually like warnings and errors about why weird stuff is happening. They're not always easy to decipher. sometimes you might look them up and then go figure out, oh, that I can't do this one thing. But yeah.
Okay, cool.
All right, that's it. Thank you.